The English dubs of Dragon Ball Z are, well, let's just say, not all that accurate.
Having these balls makes me feel something that resembles joy, I think. I want to caress them.
However, the Latin American Spanish dub, or as sometimes people like to refer to it as, the Mexican dub of Dragon Ball Z, is extremely faithful to the source material. And of course, you know that already if you watched any of the videos in my Dragon Ball dub comparison series. And if you haven't, you should totally check those videos out after you're done watching this one. So yes, the dub that was produced in Mexico of Dragon Ball Z was really well done. Not only is the acting great, it's also a really accurate representation of what was seen in the original Japanese. But that doesn't mean that this version doesn't have any changes, because it absolutely does. And so in today's video, I want to talk about 5 changes seen in the Spanish Latin American dub of Dragon Ball Z, and I'm going to determine whether these were genius changes or whether these changes went too far. Hey guys, Tony here. In case you're not aware, my background is in the Japanese language and linguistics, and I like to talk about Dragon Ball anime localization and some general anime stuff. If you're into that kind of thing, make sure to hit the subscribe button, leave me a like, and a comment, and maybe even hit that notification bell so that you don't miss out on future videos. Just a couple things before we get started. Even if you don't know Spanish, don't worry. I think this is still going to be an enjoyable video. I'm going to explain everything so that you can follow along. And the second thing is, don't read too much into the numbering. This list is in no particular order. Number 1. In the original Japanese, Vegeta is strongly associated with the second-person pronoun 貴様。
そもそも貴様の戦いには無駄が多い。貴様にこの俺が殺せると思うのか。
貴様だ。傘を忘れるなよ。
As many of you may know, the Japanese language has many pronouns. Some of them are archaic, some of them are very formal, and some of them can be considered extremely rude. Kisama is one of these rude pronouns. Kisama is a second-person pronoun. In other words, it's basically the equivalent of you, except, like I said, it's very rude. You normally don't hear this in daily conversation in Japan because, well, it's often very insulting to use it, or you might hear it, but it might be in a very joking way. But it's often used in anime and manga and games. Interestingly, even though Kisama is considered to be rude or rough or vulgar these days, this wasn't always the case. Kisama actually started out as a very formal term. And actually, if we look at the components of Kisama, this makes sense. The ki kanji here refers to somebody of noble origin, an aristocrat. And then sama is that very respectful name suffix that you hear in Dragon Ball, for example, with Kaio-sama. Remember, King Kai doesn't have an actual name. He's the Lord of Worlds. Kaio is what he is referred to as, but out of respect, characters add that sama suffix, and so you get Kaio-sama.
貴様の片付け方が分かったぜ。
Also, I need to point out here that Kisama has a somewhat samurai-ish kind of vibe to it. And also, when somebody uses it, well, they come off as arrogant and condescending. And this describes the Prince of all Saiyans perfectly. He's a Saiyan warrior who's always talking down at people. So yeah, it makes total sense that he would use Kisama. By the way, Vegeta isn't the only character to use Kisama. For example, Piccolo definitely does use it sometimes.
貴様といた数ヶ月。悪くなかったぜ。
But by far, Vegeta is the character in Dragon Ball most strongly associated with Kisama. So then that begs the question, how did the Mexican dub of Dragon Ball Z adapt Kisama? Well, in this version, Vegeta says, Insecto.
¿Me dijiste insecto? ¿Me dijiste insecto?
And well, even if you don't know Spanish, you probably guessed already, that means insect. Now, to be clear here, I'm not saying that every single time Vegeta says Kisama in the original Japanese, he says Insecto in the Spanish. I'm sure sometimes they got creative with it, but it's not really all that important if every single instance of Kisama ended up becoming Insecto. What's important is that in this version of Dragon Ball, Vegeta is also known to use a certain word to refer to people in a condescending and arrogant way. So even though Kisama and Insecto, insect, mean totally different things, they're being used in the same way and they're accomplishing the same thing. And so I really like this change. So I'm going to say this is a genius change. Number 2, Piccolo sacrificing himself to save Gohan's life is one of the most iconic moments in all of Dragon Ball. However, it's also where we find one of the most significant changes in the Latin American Spanish dub of Dragon Ball Z. Before Piccolo dies, he expresses his appreciation to Gohan for treating him like a normal person. This, of course, is a huge moment for Piccolo. He began as a villain, someone that wanted to kill Goku, and ended up being taught about, well, love by the son of his mortal enemy. Now, for the most part, Piccolo's dying speech is the same in the Spanish Latin American dub as it is in the original Japanese. However, there's a big difference in the last line. In the original Japanese, Piccolo says, "Don't die, Gohan." However, in the Mexican dub, he says this.
Gohan te quiero.
Essentially, this means, Gohan, I love you. Yes, I know that te quiero is not exactly the same as I love you. However, in this context, I love you is the best and most natural translation of te quiero. Now, in a vacuum, I absolutely love this line. I think it really packs a punch at the end of an already extremely emotional and powerful scene. So then what's the problem here? Well, the thing is that Piccolo is not the kind of character who comes outright and says, "I love you. Oh, I care so much about you." No, he shows that he cares, but he does it through his actions, and he does it indirectly. Like in this speech, he says, "You're the only person to ever treat me like a regular person." And he says, "The year I spent with you wasn't bad." Out of context saying, "Oh, the year I spent with you wasn't bad?" Yeah, that's extremely subtle. But for Piccolo, it's not subtle at all. Piccolo is saying, "I love this past year. It was so good. My life has never been better. I care so much about you, Gohan." But he would never come outright and say it in that way. He would never be so explicit about it. So even though I think the line "Gohan te quiero," "Gohan, I love you," is great, I just don't think it fits Piccolo the way Akira Toriyama portrayed him. So I'm gonna have to say that this change went too far. Number 3. In the Spanish Latin American dub of Dragon Ball Z, Dr. Gero's name was changed to Dr. Maki, and also Dr. Maki Gero. Let me explain. The first time Dr. Gero is mentioned, he's referred to as Dr. Maki.
El Dr. Maki.
But a few episodes later, he's referred to as Dr. Maki Gero.
Y pues lo más seguro es que ese viejo sea el Dr. Maki Gero.
According to Eduardo Lalo Garza, the voice of Krillin in this version of Dragon Ball Z, it was Gloria Rocha, the dubbing director of this version of Dragon Ball Z, that made this change. In multiple appearances, he's talked about how she didn't like the name Gero. Apparently, she thought that Gero, which in Spanish would normally be read as Gero, sounded kind of vulgar because it had a similar sound to a couple of other words. The first of these words apparently was ojera, which is the singular form of ojeras, and that refers to the bags under your eyes, those dark circles under your eyes you get when you're tired. The other word that Gero kind of sounded like is ulero. Now, this is Mexican slang that I was not familiar with at all, but apparently ulero means something like, "Take that!" So anyway, she didn't like how Gero sounded, and so she began thinking of what could be a replacement name. Apparently, she wanted to give him some kind of Japanese-sounding name. That day, she had eaten sushi, and so she decided to name him after her lunch, And so the name we got was Maki, as in Maki Zushi or sushi rolls. So in a way, you could say that initially his Spanish name was Dr. Roll. However, Garza explains that when Toei or the representative that worked for Toei found out that they had changed Dr. Gero's name to Dr. Maki, they weren't happy and they demanded that they fix it. But by that point, it was already too late because the episodes where the character was referred to as Dr. Maki had already aired. So they couldn't just start calling him Dr. Gero or Dr. Hero. And apparently the solution that Rocha came up with was to call him Dr. Maki Gero. Now it needs to be pointed out here that this is really weird for the Spanish Latin American dub of Dragon Ball Z. I can't think of another instance in which a character in this version of Dragon Ball Z had their name changed like this. Yes, there's a couple instances of name changes in the Mexican dub of the original Dragon Ball. Most notably, Chi-Chi's name got changed to Milk. Why? Because Chi-Chi in Mexico refers to boobs. So it makes sense that they would want to change her name. And actually, Milk works really well because Chi-Chi in Japanese can refer to milk as well. But Gero getting turned into Dr. Maki or Dr. Maki Gero doesn't work at all. First of all, the name pun is completely lost. And then they didn't even keep the Gero pronunciation in Dr. Maki Gero. Yes, I know that when a G is followed by an E in Spanish, for example, like in the word gente, which means people, you pronounce that as he rather than with a hard G like ge as in Gero. But so what? In this version of Dragon Ball Z, the characters referred to Vegeta as Vegeta. So Dr. Gero could have remained Dr. Gero, or at the very least, he could have remained Dr. Maki Gero. And so unfortunately, I'm going to have to say that this change went too far. Sorry to interrupt, but just gotta let you know, I just posted a new t-shirt design over on mechanekosushi.com. That's my t-shirt shop. The new design features new artwork by my good friend, the Japanese artist Akihiro Horai. As always, he's delivered another incredible design. This one, again, features his original take on Son Wukong, aka Son Goku, from Journey to the West. I love his artwork, and this is another incredible t-shirt. It's available in multiple colors, so if that looks interesting to you and you want to support what I do on this channel, plus a real human artist, then go ahead and get yourself a t-shirt from mechanekosushi.com. Link down in the pinned comment. Number 4. This change happens during the 25th Tenkaichi Martial Arts Tournament. Specifically, it happens after a couple of Tenkaichi workers ask Piccolo if he's feeling okay because his complexion looks kind of off. In the original Japanese, Piccolo basically says, "Leave me alone, my complexion has always been this color." However, in the Latin American Spanish dub, he says this.
No me molesten. El que esté verde no significa que no esté maduro.
Leave me alone. The fact that I'm green doesn't mean I'm not ripe. Now, I love this line. I think it's silly and clever, but also maybe it doesn't translate all that well into English. Basically, what Piccolo is saying here is, yeah, I may be green like an unripened banana, but that doesn't mean I'm not okay, or I'm not well, or I'm not ready to go. Now, this is obviously very different from the original Japanese, but is the change justified? Well, the original Japanese is also hilarious, but I think that a little bit of the humor is lost in translation when it's brought over to English or even Spanish. So again, in the original Japanese, what Piccolo says is, "Leave me alone, my face has always been this color." But he uses very harsh and direct language. He literally uses the imperative form, the command form of hotte oku, which in this context means leave alone. He commands the workers to leave him alone. and he uses a very harsh tone as well. To me, this makes it come off at least a little bit like Piccolo is kind of scrambling here, like he's trying to come up with something to say that is going to make the workers go away and stop questioning him. Otherwise, I would think that he wouldn't react in such an aggressive way. He's usually a very calm and collected character, so for him to slightly panic here and say, "Leave me alone," it's pretty funny, right? It's always funny to see Piccolo put on the spot like this. But the other layer to this that makes this funny in Japanese is that we see a little bit of a manzai dynamic going on here. Manzai is basically a Japanese style of comedy that is really similar to that old Laurel and Hardy comedic duo style of comedy. Basically, you have a so-called straight man who is the serious guy, and then the other guy is the so-called funny guy, the guy that says the stupid and ridiculous things. In Japanese, the terms used are tsukomi, the straight guy, and the boke, the funny dumb guy. So in manzai, the dumb guy says the stupid, silly things, and then the tsukomi, the straight guy, corrects him, sometimes hits him, and says, "How could you say that?" And when he or she does that, that's a cue for the audience to laugh. Now, going back to the Piccolo scene, what happens is the Tenkaichi worker is the boke, the dumb guy. This guy asks Piccolo if he's feeling okay because he's looking green. We all know that that's a stupid question because Piccolo was always green. Of course he's feeling fine. There's nothing wrong with Piccolo. And then Piccolo acts as the straight guy, the tsukomi, and he says, "Get out of here! I've always looked this way." And so this acts as the surrogate voice of the audience, and it tells them, joke is over, you can laugh now. Now, I'm not saying that these kind of jokes don't work in English and Spanish. They do. But this comedic dynamic is really common both in media and in daily conversation in Japan. So I think this joke packs a little bit more of a punch in the original Japanese. Simply having Piccolo say, "Leave me alone, my face has always been this color," just isn't as funny as it is in Japanese, at least in my opinion. So I'm totally okay with tweaking this joke in order to preserve the comedic impact of it in, well, in this case, Spanish. That is, as long as the change doesn't conflict with how Piccolo is supposed to be portrayed. And I think that the Spanish version of this joke doesn't do that. I think it totally works with Piccolo's character. It's funny and it's very memorable. So I'm going to say that this change is genius. Number 5. Frieza killing Krillin. It's one of the most shocking and impactful moments in the Dragon Ball franchise. And this is also when we get one of the most notable changes in the Latin American Spanish dub of Dragon Ball Z. You see, right before Frieza pops the weasel, he doesn't say anything in the original Japanese. He just laughs. However, in the Mexican dub of Dragon Ball Z, he says this.
¿Qué pasa contigo? No te muevas. ¿No ves que te voy a matar?
This translates to, "What's wrong with you? Don't move. Don't you see I'm going to kill you?" So as I said earlier, this line does not exist at all in the original Japanese. This isn't a case of a line being tweaked. No, the voice actor, Gerardo Reyero, completely created this from nothing. And actually, this has ended up becoming a really famous line in the Latin American Dragon Ball fandom. Generally speaking, I'm not a fan of stuff like this. Making changes is normal and necessary so that you end up with a dub that actually captures the vibe of the source material. But when you start inserting lines created from scratch, you enter into dangerous territory. Especially if you do a lot of this, because then you end up with something that isn't an accurate adaptation. It starts to enter into, well, totally different territory. And if you go really heavy-handed with this, you start to approach, like, parody territory. That being said, I really love this line. It makes Frieza come off as exactly what he is. Arrogant, full of himself, drunk on his own power. He is saying to Krillin, "How dare you not notice that I'm about to kill you? Out of respect to me, you should not be moving right now." So this line shows that the voice actor, Reyero, actually really understands Frieza as a character. So even though I'm not in favor of new lines being inserted into dubs, in this case, I'm okay with it. Like if this kind of thing was very common in the Spanish Latin American dub, I'd probably judge this instance a bit more harshly, but because it's such a rare occurrence, I'm gonna say that this is a genius change. Let me know if I missed any changes in the Spanish Latin American dub of Dragon Ball Z. But actually, like, there's not that many big notable changes because it's so damn faithful to the original source material. But maybe I missed something. So let me know in the comments if you can think of one. And let me know if you agree with my assessments of these changes. Of course, don't forget to subscribe, leave me a like, and I might be doing a video that is not about Dragon Ball soon. I won't tell you what it's about, but I think it'll be interesting. If you enjoy my assessments of Dragon Ball localization and translation, I think you'll probably enjoy some of the stuff that I'm cooking right now. So stay tuned for that, but you gotta subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss out. All right, guys, see you in the next one.